Judas Cradle. The Judas cradle emerged in the dark prisons of medieval Europe as both a punishment and interrogation device. Prison wardens favored its reliability and the way it broke both the body and will. The device consisted of a pyramid-shaped seat with a pointed tip, mounted on a wooden stool or frame. Its name invoked the betrayer of Christ, suggesting this was the fate reserved for those who turned against authority. In 15th century Spain, it became the preferred method for extracting confessions from those accused of heresy or treason. The condemned would first be stripped naked, exposing them to both the elements and humiliation. Guards would bind their hands above their head or behind their back, making it impossible to brace against what was coming. The victim was then positioned directly above the pointed tip of the pyramid. Initially, the sharp end would press against their most sensitive regions without breaking the skin. This moment of anticipation was often when the first confessions were offered. For those who remained silent, the true torment began. Guards would slowly lower the prisoner, allowing their body weight to press against the point. The pyramid's tip was designed to penetrate, but not kill quickly. With each passing minute, the pressure increased. Some victims were lowered manually, while others had weights attached to their ankles, dragging them down with inexorable force. The tip would eventually pierce the flesh, creating a wound that widened as the body descended further. Blood loss weakened the victim, while the open wound invited infection. Fever would set in within days. Throughout the process, interrogators would return, offering relief in exchange for information or confession. Many broke psychologically before significant physical damage occurred. Those who endured faced a slow death from blood loss, infection, or the gradual tearing of internal organs as the pyramid worked deeper into their body with each involuntary movement. Spanish donkey. The Spanish donkey earned its grim reputation during the Inquisition. Though records show versions appeared earlier across medieval Europe, public officials named it for its vague resemblance to the back of a donkey, though victims found nothing familiar about its agonizing edge. The device consisted of a narrow wooden beam positioned vertically, like an inverted triangle, with the sharpened edge pointing upward. Unlike other instruments concealed in dungeon chambers, the Spanish donkey often stood in town squares, where the punishment served as both retribution and warning. Prisoners were stripped of clothing and forced to straddle the triangular beam, their legs dangling down either side. Guards positioned the edge precisely at the perineum, where even the slightest pressure caused immediate pain. Initial discomfort quickly transformed into something more sinister. Heavy iron weights were attached to the victim's ankles, starting with 10 pounds on each side. The weight pulled downward, forcing the sharp edge against delicate tissue. Every 15 minutes, officials would add more weight. 20 pounds became 40, then 60. The prisoner's body had nowhere to go except downward. The wooden edge, sometimes enhanced with metal, began its slow invasion of flesh. Onlookers gathered to witness the spectacle, their presence adding humiliation to physical suffering. Some victims lasted only hours before the edge split skin and began slicing through muscle and tissue. Blood ran down the sides of the wooden triangle, staining it darker with each new prisoner. The officials kept precise records of weights and time intervals. Those who confessed early might be spared the full procedure. The unlucky ones endured until the edge carved completely through their bodies, causing massive blood loss and shock. Some lost consciousness from pain before the final moments. Others remained terrifyingly aware as their bodies were literally split by the relentless pressure, the sound of tearing flesh audible to the gathered crowd as internal organs became external and life drained away. Pair of anguish. The pair of anguish first appeared in European interrogation chambers during the 1600s. Unlike many devices whose use is well documented, the pair exists in a shadow of historical uncertainty. Some scholars argue it was merely a threat, while others point to detailed illustrations in Inquisition manuals. The device itself was deceptively elegant, a metal bulb roughly the size of a fist with 4 petals that expanded outward when a screw mechanism was turned. Museum examples show meticulous craftsmanship, with precisely fitted springs and smooth tapered surfaces that belied their purpose. Inquisitors designed different variations for specific body cavities. The oral version was most common, reserved for heretics and blasphemers. The victim would be restrained, often in a seated position with head tilted backward. The closed pair would be inserted into the mouth. In its collapsed state, the device appeared manageable. False hope often lasted seconds. With the first turn of the screw, the petals would separate slightly. Each quarter turn widened them further, a mechanical blooming that forced the jaws apart. As the interrogator continued turning, pressure against teeth became unbearable. Molars cracked under forces they were never designed to withstand. The expanding metal stretched the corners of the mouth until splitting began. Victims could produce only unintelligible sounds as their ability to speak disappeared with each twist. Blood from torn gums and fractured teeth ran down their chin and neck. The pair's expansion was methodical, measured in precise increments. For those who refused to confess, the device would reach its maximum diameter, approximately 4 inches when fully deployed. Facial bones fractured under the pressure. the palate could split. Breathing became labored through a nose now bearing the mouth's burden. Some victims suffocated as blood and tissue blocked airways. Others survived with permanent disfigurement, their confession finally extracted along with portions of their jaw, the pear's petals painted red when finally withdrawn from what had once been a human face. Scavenger's Daughter. The Scavenger's Daughter first appeared in the Tower of London during the reign of Henry VIII. Created by Lieutenant Leonard Skeffington in 1531, the device was designed as the opposite of the rack. While the rack pulled limbs apart, the Scavenger's Daughter forced the body to collapse inward upon itself. The apparatus consisted of an iron frame with hinges and bars that could be tightened with screws. Its official purpose was to extract confessions from prisoners considered enemies of the crown. The device gained notoriety during the religious persecutions of Tudor England. The process began with the prisoner forced to kneel. Guards would fit the iron frame around the body, positioning metal bands across the back, under the thighs, and behind the neck. Initially, the prisoner would feel only the cold metal against skin. The interrogator would ask questions, offering freedom from the device in exchange for information. For those who refused to speak, the methodical compression began. The screw mechanism was turned slowly, bringing the metal bands closer together. As the device tightened, the prisoner's knees were forced upward toward the chest while the head was simultaneously pushed downward. The natural curve of the spine was forced to bend beyond its limits. Within minutes, muscles began to cramp from the unnatural position. The prisoner's breathing became shallow and labored as the ribcage compressed against the lungs. Sweat covered the skin as the body fought against its metal cage. The compression continued inexorably. After 1 hour, blood would begin seeping from the nose as internal pressure built. After 2, ears would leak crimson drops. The screw mechanism allowed precise control, keeping victims alive but in unspeakable agony. When turned to its final position, the body folded almost completely, compressing organs until they failed. Lungs collapsed first, making each breath shallower than the last. Ribs splintered under pressure, sending bone fragments into soft tissue. The heart, unable to expand properly, fluttered and stopped. Death came as the ultimate mercy, the body crushed into a fraction of its natural size. Peine forte et dure. The peine forte et dure emerged in medieval English courts as a solution to a legal paradox. The phrase translates to hard and forceful punishment, but this clinical term masked a calculated brutality. Under English common law, a defendant who refused to enter a plea could not be tried. Some remained silent to prevent their property from being seized after conviction. The courts developed peine forte et dure not as punishment for a crime, but as coercion to participate in the legal process. The practice continued into the 1700s, with precise protocols documented in court records. The process began with the accused stripped naked and placed on their back on the cold stone floor of a dungeon or cell. Their arms and legs were stretched outward and secured with rope or chain to metal rings embedded in the ground. A wooden board was positioned over their body, covering them from shoulders to ankles. The first day, they received no food. The second, a small piece of barley bread. The third, a drink of stagnant water from the nearest puddle or ditch. On the fourth day, the waits began. Court officials placed a single stone on the wooden board directly above the chest. Each stone weighed approximately 20 pounds. Every few hours, another stone was added. The pressure built gradually, making each weight breath more difficult than the last. The sternum bent inward with audible creaking. Ribs flexed beyond their limits. The prisoner faced a choice: enter a plea or endure more weight. Some lasted hours, others days. The most famous case was Giles Corey, accused of witchcraft in Salem in 1692. As stones piled on his chest, crushing his 81-year-old body, witnesses reported he spoke only twice. First to request more weight, hastening his own end. Then, as his chest cavity began to collapse and organs compressed, he gasped his final words through blood-flecked lips. More weight. His heart stopped after 2 days, the stone still in place as his body surrendered to the immovable pressure. Heretic's Fork. The heretic's fork first appeared in the interrogation chambers of the Spanish Inquisition during the 1400s. Despite its simple design, inquisitors considered it among their most effective tools. The device consisted of a 2-pronged metal fork, each end sharpened to a needle-like point. One prong was positioned under the chin, while the other pressed against the sternum. A leather strap around the neck held the fork in place, creating constant tension between the 2 points. Primarily used against those accused of blasphemy or heresy, the fork prevented speech without causing immediate death. The application began with the prisoner seated on a backless stool. The inquisitor would place the lower prong against the soft tissue under the chin, carefully positioning the upper prong against the breastbone. The strap would be secured tightly around the neck, creating immediate discomfort. The initial pain was minimal, just 2 points of pressure. The true torment lay in what came next. The prisoner could neither lower their chin without puncturing the skin beneath it, nor raise their head without the upper prong piercing their chest. Hours passed in perfect stillness. Any movement, even the slight nod of drowsiness, drove the prongs deeper. Blood trickled in thin rivulets down the neck and chest. After 6 hours, muscle fatigue became unbearable. The neck trembled from the strain of maintaining one position. After 12, hallucinations often began as sleep deprivation took hold. The mind registered every millimeter of movement with fresh pain. Some prisoners were kept in this position for days. The fork rarely killed directly, but its psychological impact was profound. The constant, unrelenting vigilance required to avoid self-injury drove many to mental collapse. Those who succumbed to exhaustion would slump forward, driving both prongs deep into flesh. The resulting wounds became infected in the filthy conditions of medieval prisons. Sepsis claimed those who survived the initial ordeal, their bodies finally surrendering to a slow, delirious death after days of perfect, agonizing wakefulness. Mazzatello. The mozzatella was an official method of game-overing criminals in the Papal States from the 1600s until 1870. The term translates literally to little mallet, though the implement was anything but small. The procedure combined religious ceremony with brutal efficiency in a public spectacle that drew thousands of spectators. Unlike other European methods that emphasized slow suffering, the mozzatella was designed as a relatively quick process, though this offered little comfort to those who experienced its crushing impact. The method was reserved for the most severe crimes against the church and state. The condemned would be led through the streets of Rome to a scaffold erected in a public square. Priests walked alongside, offering final prayers and opportunities for confession. Upon reaching the platform, the prisoner would kneel, facing away from the crowd, sometimes blindfolded. A wooden block was positioned before them, but unlike typical beheadings, they would not place their head upon it. Instead, they remained kneeling upright, their final moments spent in prayer or silent contemplation. The executioner would approach from behind wearing a black hood that concealed his identity. In his hands, he carried the mazzatello, a wooden mallet with a heavy metal head, weighing approximately 15 pounds. The crowd would fall silent as he took position. With practiced precision, the executioner would swing the mallet in a single, powerful arc, striking the back of the condemned's skull with tremendous force. The impact shattered bone and caused immediate unconsciousness. The blow itself was rarely the direct cause of death. The unconscious body would collapse forward onto the block, still alive but completely unaware. Within seconds, the executioner would draw a knife and cut deeply across the throat, severing the carotid arteries and jugular vein. Blood poured forth in rhythmic pulses as the heart continued beating briefly, pumping life onto the wooden platform. Death followed within moments, the ceremonial mallet and knife combining religious symbolism with lethal efficiency in a ritual that transformed criminal punishment into sacred theater. Scold's Bridle. The Scold's Bridle first appeared in Britain during the 1600s as a punishment exclusively for women. Local magistrates used it to silence those they deemed troublesome, women who argued, gossiped, or spoke against authority figures. The device was also called the branks, or gossip's bridle, names that reduced serious punishment to something almost comical. In reality, the bridle was a sophisticated instrument of pain and humiliation. Court records from the period show over 400 documented cases in England alone, with similar devices used across Scotland and parts of Germany. The bridle consisted of a metal cage that enclosed the entire head, with particular attention to the mouth. A plate extended inward, pressing down on the tongue. Most designs featured a spike between 1 and 2 inches long that rested directly on the tongue's surface. The entire apparatus locked at the back of the neck, preventing removal without a key. Application was public, often in the town square. The woman would be held still while the device was fitted, the mouthpiece inserted last. The initial pain was sharp and immediate as the spike pressed into the tongue's sensitive tissues. Any movement, any attempt to shift the position, drove the spike deeper. Instinctively, the woman would try to pull her tongue back, but the plate's design prevented this. Speaking became impossible. Even swallowing required careful concentration to avoid further injury. Once secured, the woman was led through town on a leash, often by her husband or a town official. The procession could last hours, sometimes an entire day. Saliva would build up without the ability to swallow normally, running down the chin and neck. The tongue swelled around the spike, increasing the pain with each passing hour. Thirst became unbearable, but drinking was impossible. By the time the bridle was removed, the tongue was often permanently damaged, bearing a wound that would become infected in an era before antibiotics. Some women lost portions of their tongue to gangrene. Others developed infections that spread to the throat, causing death by slow suffocation days after the punishment officially ended.